Okay, you do the intro again.
Okay, hold on just a second. Sorry. Sorry, I got a little tickle. I need to stop tickling
Tell
myself.
you what, how about I go while you're
Okay, all right.
doing
Let me
whatever the hell
turn.
you're
All right,
doing.
I'm going to turn my microphone off. But I
All
can.
right.
Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
A place where pop culture creatives
Discover design icons that make us tick.
and we share a few cocktails in the process.
Yep. Today, we're doing our dutiful service by revealing secret signs and symbols hidden in plain sight. Once you see them, you can't unsee them.
So join us in this public service, preferably in a public house, looking for a ring at the bottom of your beer mug when we secretly sneak back into the bar.
All right, well, back in the bar, and Elliot,
Yes,
I've got a secret.
a secret.
A secret. It's. I want to share it.
Okay.
It's kind of fantastical. It's a little unexpected,
Oh.
but you want to guess?
So fantastical yet
Yeah.
unexpected.
Yeah.
Does this secret involve orcs, a dungeon master, and some 20-sided dice?
I thought you had it until you mentioned the 20-side dice. The whole dungeon and stuff like that was right on point with what I was thinking.
Oh,
but
well,
no,
you know,
not the
when
20-sided
someone
dice.
says dungeon, I guess, yeah, there's a couple different directions you could go with that.
That's true. That's true. But, you know, there are some things involving secret societies that, you know, we could talk about or sort of even societies that are kind of hidden in plain sight, right? Things, symbols, networks hidden in plain sight, as it were.
I like this.
You've seen the History Channel. You know how it goes.
I've seen people who have seen the History Channel. I'm sort of between cable payments right now.
All right, good. Well, you know, what I was thinking is, wouldn't it be fun to explore something that we probably have seen a lot of, but never really paid that much attention to? So, yeah, I mean, off the top of your head, what are some things you think of? Like road signs? Like, what do you see every day?
Oh, well, when you said something I see a lot but don't pay a lot of attention to,
No, okay, I know what you go. Not on your person.
I was going to say you.
Not on my person.
Well, not that. I don't see that much of you.
Okay, all right. Well, you know what?
Yeah.
I was taking out a $1 bill, and
Where
there's a
were
bunch of
you when this
stuff.
was happening?
You know what? Let's not get into that
Oh,
yet.
okay.
I was taking out a dollar bill, and you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. This dollar bill, Elliot. There's gee-gobs, there's hoo-has, there's doodads all over this place. And I thought, this is meaning something, like all these things, right? I mean, we kind of know, but do we really know? So I started looking into it a little bit.
Yeah, and this is something that's iconic. I mean, everybody
Oh, yeah,
everywhere in the
yeah.
world knows, at least at a very high level, what a dollar bill, an American dollar bill, looks like.
Yeah, it's like the basic thing. And you know what? I looked up, there's actually 12 billion of those little suckers floating around in circulation. That's a lot. I don't know if you tried to make it rain 12 billion worth, like that, you would never, the rain would never stop, right?
Well, I wish it would rain a little bit over here at my house.
Yeah, okay. Well, how about you? What have you been thinking about?
I love that you mentioned things hidden in plain sight. Because when I was thinking about this a little bit, it harkened back to our episode about things like street culture and tribes and, certain groups sort of having their own codes or their own culture, their own sort of understanding, their own rules. And what I gravitated toward was the Hobo Alphabet or Hobo Symbols.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've already talked about the Hobo Alphabet.
Well,
first
I talked
impressions.
about, the Hobo typeface. Now,
Right.
I'm not sure that the Duke boys would be aware of this Hobo Alphabet. Okay.
Okay.
This is, and I think maybe I'm just obsessed with hobos.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, so a language, symbols that people riding the rails use to communicate with each other?
Yeah, we'll get into it a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, things like where's a good place to eat? Where can you sleep for the night? These very utilitarian sorts of things. But, now I will say I don't think any self-respecting hobo would turn down a buck or two.
Sure.
So what is he or she going to receive? Like you were talking about a dollar bill.
Mm-hmm.
There is I feel like you're about to open up a whole can of worms here. While the hobo opens up a can of soup and gets that on the fire, let's open up a can of worms. Let's get into this dollar bill and let's start to talk about some of what's happening on these things.
So there's a lot of symbols and signs, as I said, on and I'm going to specifically talk about the $1 bill because it's so ubiquitous.
Right.
And there's also, as you probably know, you probably heard, there's a lot of, let's call them alternate theories of some of the things. So I'm going to touch on that some too. But first of all, what's interesting is the Bureau of Engraving and Printing started right around the time of the Civil War, 1862. It happens to be one of the largest printers in the world. And before then, there were experiments with paper money throughout our country's history, but they were largely unsuccessful because people didn't trust paper money. They didn't trust the notes. They preferred gold and silver.
Mm-hmm.
But they needed money to finance the Civil War, so Congress authorized the issuance of what they called demand notes, so named because you could redeem them for coins on demand. So it was basically like a substitute for a coin, and that's where they developed the name greenback.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's kind of like an IOU.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a rain check of some kind.
Yeah,
like, I demand my gold coins now.
Cough them up.
That's right. So pretty obvious. Everyone knows whose portrait is on the $1 bill, don't we? Yes. Let's say it together.
Alfred
Barbara
E. Newman.
Bush. Perfect. Okay. Yes, George Washington. But you know what? George Washington never wanted his face on our currency. He thought that was like something a monarch would do and never wanted that. Mm-hmm. And since he died 65 years earlier, they went ahead and went for it and put his face on the dollar bill. But what's interesting, though, is there's a reason that there are no living people on our currency. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Let me give you just a little tidbit of this, because I'm always looking for the drama. You know that.
Is this like an assassination plot? Like, do you never want to be...
No. They were issuing, it was like the third issue of some notes, some 5-cent notes, as a matter of fact. And Congress said to the Bureau, we want to honor William Clark, the famous expedition explorer of Lewis and Clark fame, by putting his portrait on this note. And when the new design arrived at the Superintendent of National Currency, his desk, there was a note on there that read, where the portrait would go, Clark. So, unfortunately, the superintendent's name was Spencer Clark, and he took this as bold direction to add his face to the bill.
What?
So he added his face to the bill, and it was printed.
Really?
And Congress, yes. Yeah, true story. So Congress got mad, of course, because they're like, why are you doing this? They played a little looser with the rules back then. So In 1866, they passed an amendment that said all U.S. money will never feature a portrait or likeness of any living person again.
That's nuts.
So anyway, that's a little background on the portrait, which we all know is George Washington. On one side of the dollar, there's a great symbol, the seal, which we talked about in our rock bands episode, our rock band logos episode.
Yes.
And we talked a lot about that. So everyone go listen to that and you'll hear more about it. But what's interesting is Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they were the first of 3 committees that were appointed to work on this great seal, which takes up a lot of real estate on the dollar. It took them 4 years and even 2 more committees to accomplish this task, and then another 2 years to get it finally approved. And it wasn't until 1782 when the Secretary of Congress, who was working with a young lawyer and artist named William Barton, incorporated all these elements from all 3 committees. This was literally designed by committee.
That's always a recipe for success.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, 4 years, 3 committees, how hard could it be?
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Right. So finally, they incorporated elements of all these committees. Now, Ben, Tom, and John, they were really hung up on this Eye of Providence, which made it through the final committees and the final design. That's the eye that's in the triangle, the Eye of Providence.
And isn't that a Freemason symbol or something like that?
Well, it might be. We're going to talk a little bit about that.
I'm jumping ahead in the plot.
No. But I mean, that is a common theme.
Okay.
Yes. But some other interesting themes that, just didn't quite make the final design cut. Like they wanted to include the children of Israel in the wilderness, and oddly enough, didn't make the cut for whatever reason.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Great Seal. So we got the eagle. The bald eagle is definitely unique to America, and it's pretty well known. Ben Franklin fought against that because he thought it had bad moral character. Yeah, I know, right? He said the bird didn't even fish for itself, so whatever. Franklin and Thomas Jefferson wanted the seal to include an Egyptian pharaoh, too. Like, what is that about?
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
All right. So the eagle, oddly enough, in Philadelphia from 1830 to 1836, a real live eagle took up residence in the U.S. Mint building. And the workers there named him Peter, the Mint Eagle, which they could have come up with a little better name. They cared for him, and allegedly he's the model that's used on engraving for years to come of eagles after that. They had a ready-made model right there in the building.
Wow, okay.
So everybody's familiar with the seal. There's a crest over the eagle, or a shield, I should say, over the eagle's chest. It's not supported, which that means America must rely on its own protection and virtues. And the unsupported shield has a bar at the top, which I didn't know this. And if you look on the dollar bill, it's engraved. There's 12 lines and 11 spaces. It's solid in other things, but it's said that represents the federal government. And then there are 13 vertical stripes under that, obviously representing the original 13 colonies. Mm-hmm. There are also stars above the eagle's head, and it's kind of like fireworks sort of popping out over the eagle's head. The official description, the Treasury Department says that it's glory breaking through the clouds. But I imagine that they say it more like it's glory breaking through the clouds. It's a misunderstanding, sort of tolling away. And everybody knows about the olive branch in the right hand or right talon and the arrows in the left talon. And in the beak, it's a well-known Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning from many one. Everybody, you've seen that. Now, on the other side of the dollar bill, from that very familiar face of the seal, there was a less familiar backside of the seal. And this happened in 1934. No one knew that there was really a backside of the seal. The Secretary of Agriculture, his name's Henry Wallace, he was hanging out waiting to meet the Secretary of State, Cordell Hull, and he was flipping through a publication and realized that there was a backside that wasn't being used. So they convinced President Roosevelt to include the pyramid side on the new currency as well. So that's where we get into a little bit more of the symbolic stuff that was raising some questions. You talked about the Eye of Providence being a Masonic symbol. It actually caps off this unfinished pyramid.
Yeah.
And the pyramid, it's a classic symbol of strength and stability, but it was purposefully left unfinished at the top to symbolize that we're never finished. We're always growing.
Ah, I thought it was just this mystical floating eye, that there was some magic
the eye
there.
kind of, yeah, well, that's kind of what it means.
Okay.
It finishes the top, and it is well-known use of a Masonic symbol, but it's a really ancient symbol, too. It represents what Masons would call the great architect of the universe. But it's been used in Renaissance paintings and, all sorts of famous artworks and everything else to sort of represent the divinity. It's in a triangle, which more currently would represent the Holy Trinity. So, there's a lot of symbolism in the placement, and I'll get into that a little bit. But what's interesting on the pyramid is there's some Roman numerals at the very bottom. MDCCLXXVI, which you probably know your Roman numerals easily, Elliot, and you would know right off the top of that is 1776, right?
I figured.
The date, the foundation for which America was built. So even just in this structure, it's pretty much about building, right? There's foundations, there's it's architectural, all of these things. Okay, across the top, there's some Latin on the reverse side of the seal, and it reads, Annuit coepus. And that is placed kind of around the Eye of Providence. And because of that placement, the standard translation means that Providence favors our undertakings, or Providence has favored our undertakings. Basically, God is smiling on us. And across the bottom, there's another Latin phrase that says Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New Order of the Ages. I know New Order is one of your favorite bands, Elliot, and it's great that our currency was recognizing them.
Well, they are a band with universal appeal.
That's true. That's true. All right. Couple other little things here I want to mention, and then I really do want to hear about some hobo language. First of all, no one is superstitious when they were designing these dollar bills because there are 13s everywhere on this dollar. Literally. There are 13 stars above the eagle. There are 13 leaves on the olive branch. There's 13 olives on the olive branch. There's 13 arrows in the eagle's left talon. There's 13 steps on the pyramid. There are 13 bars on the shield. It's a little bit, maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they planned it, but the Latin annuit coeptus and e pluribus unum both have 13 letters. And even on the little tiny Treasury Department seal, there are also 13 stars. There happens to be a key under that, too, that means, signifies official authority. But 13 was a big deal when they were designing.
Yeah, are there 13 leaves on the branch clutched by the eagle and 13 arrows in the bundle? And all this stuff. This is crazy, man. I mean, it's
13 olives. You have to get out your magnifying glass and see that there's 13 olives on the branch, and again, the letters in Latin. I mean, it's getting a little okay, this was planned out pretty heavily. It's trying to tell us something.
Yeah, it makes me wonder why today, as we're sitting here having this conversation, 13 is still such an unlucky number in our culture.
Must not have been back then, right?
I guess not.
And then there are these kind of stray numbers and letters that are just sort of scattered all around the $1 bill. And what those mean are basically where that particular bill was printed, that particular note, and its particular plate position when it was printed. So they're codes. Okay. I know, it's kind of interesting. So if you look on the front of a dollar bill, there's a 1 or 2 digit number, and it appears 4 times, 2 on each side of the bill, and that refers to the bank that printed the bill. For instance, a number 1 is Boston, number 2 is New York, so on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll also see a letter that'll be it'll be A to H and a number. And that combination refers to the position that the note was on the particular printing plate.
Okay.
A1 would be the very top left position. H4 would be the very bottom right position. So I thought that was pretty cool that like all of these things that we're carrying around, they're carrying this unique history with them, you know? I thought that was really cool. Now, if by chance you see a star with your serial numbers, that means that this note has been recreated to replace one that was destroyed. Because no two bills can share the same serial number, if a bill has to be reprinted for some reason, they add the star.
So, like when they get the bills back and they shred them, they reuse the same serial number?
Yeah, or if really after it's shredded, that's gone, that's done. But if a torn bill comes through or a defaced bill in some way,
got it,
they will reprint that serial number and put a star with it because it can't have the same serial number.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like this little, I don't know, thing. What is it? 5 inches long, 2 inches tall, something like 2.5 inches tall.
6 inches. The dollar bill is 6 inches. Yeah.
And it carries all this sort of history and documentation with it, which I thought was just really interesting. Now, Elliot, I want to hear about the hobos because I want to tease you a little bit and say that there's some other theories floating out there in the World Wide Web of what these symbols mean. And
I have no doubt.
Well, I'm going to let you and your hobo friends figure out if they're legit or not.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't think we could really ever have a good conversation on this podcast without a little bit of reality peppered in with a little bit of myth. And, these hobo symbols, we'll start talking about them and we'll see, just like the mother road that a lot of the hobos would maybe travel down or the train tracks off into the distance, we'll see where this story takes us. How about that?
Okay. That sounds great.
Okay. So Hobo Symbols, I've talked about these just a little bit at a very high level. What were they? Now, as we've mentioned, I somehow have an obsession with hobos, the hobo typeface, the Dukes of Hazzard typeface. So one might think, oh, well, surely there's some relationship. And I had alluded to that in, the typeface episode that we talked about that, was the old hobo hanging around, right? So we'll talk about these hobo symbols, but then we'll also, of course, we have to kind of understand and unpack what was a hobo. Right? It's like for a lot of younger listeners, they might not even know what that means. So let's start with the symbols themselves. You mentioned with the dollar bill that there were a lot of things going on and they represented a lot of things to a lot of different people. You talked about this design by committee and everybody kind of wanted all these things thrust into this very, very small piece of real estate. Well, the hobos traveled across a very large piece of real estate, basically the United States, right? And so they needed some of these just basic necessities of life. So if you're coming into a town and you're a traveler on foot, or maybe you've come in, you've hopped a train and you've come into town, you need to know where can you camp safely? Or where could you get a bite to eat? Or if you're approaching a house, will you get some sort of handout? Or is there a mean dog that's going to chase you? And so these notions, this was sort of a secret code that could be left in plain sight that the average person would never pick up on. And we will have a picture of a lot of these symbols on our episode page, just to give an idea of what some of these symbols, which were really hieroglyphs, what they really look like.
Yeah. I imagine they have to be really simple.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely, because they had to be drawn quickly, carved into things.
Right.
These symbols appeared on posts, bridge abutments, fences, outbuildings, and you had to kind of think about, if you're a hobo, well, the people who are coming in behind me, where are they likely to go? And so how do I make sure I put this in a conspicuous place where they'll, the next group of people coming through town are going to see it? So there's this secret language, and it was, everybody didn't have a pen in their pocket, so they're using whatever they can get their hands on to leave these symbols. A lump of coal, a piece of chalk, a nail scratching something into wood, or even a sharp-edged rock, right? So this was survival code, and it was under the radar for the average person. Like, no one's going to be wandering around and say, why is there this, hobo doodle on my mailbox post? They're going to, if they notice it at all, it'll just seem like some odd thing that maybe a child doodled or something like this. So this was a warning about a dangerous town or a dangerous person in the town. It marked a place where free food could be had, or maybe shelter for the night, right? Or things like free medical care, and provide directions to where work was available, right? Because these guys and some gals still had to earn a buck, to go back to your mysterious document, right? They wanted a few of those in their pockets.
Some of those greenbacks.
Yeah, exactly. So getting into who hobos are, who hobos were. So if you, again, are a student of pop culture, as you and I both are, and I think a lot of our listeners are as well, if you think about the movies, you think about cartoons and pop culture in general, there's sort of a pretty romanticized idea of the life of a hobo, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned a minute ago, we're just hopping on trains to get from one place to another. I actually had a children's book that my mom had gotten me, and I think it was called Charlie the Tramp. And it was like a muskrat or some character, and he would, have his bindle stick and hop on the train to get from one place to another. So even children are getting fed this romanticized ideal, right? So you got your bindle stick, which is your kerchief with your belongings in it, tied to a long stick. You prop it over your shoulder. You're smoking your pipe or your cigarette. You have no particular worries. The world is your oyster. You're just wandering around town. You might have on your head a half-crumpled hat. On your foot, you might have a shoe with a hole in the sole. You might have pants with a patch on the butt. But hey, who cares? You're your own boss. You don't have to be anywhere at any particular time, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look, it gets even better. You're resting your head at night under the stars. You maybe have a little bit of fire. You have a little pot of stew burbling over it, right? Or a can of beans or something like that. So where has this trope been seen? In addition to children's books, think Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny. I mean, you and I both grew up seeing these things, right? So this is how we got introduced to the idea of a hobo. Well, in reality, of course, things were a little bit different. Hobos were nomads. They were these migratory workers who roamed the United States, and they took jobs really wherever they could. And this was often in rural areas. And they never wanted to wear out their welcome. They knew other people were behind them. They kind of didn't want folks to catch on to the idea that they were transient or homeless, so they never wanted to spend too long in any one place, right?
They were migratory.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Migratory workers. So where did these guys come from? So it's really interesting, Todd, that you talked about the Civil War and the fact that the mint started to produce dollar bills during the Civil War. Because right after the Civil War was when hobos started to appear, right? So you have all these army veterans, the war ends, they had just seen part of the world, right? They'd gone off to war a little bit, seen another part of the country. There was a lot of destruction in these different towns. And so these guys needed to make a buck. They needed to start working. So they started their migration after the Civil War. But it really hit its stride during the Great Depression in the late 20s for obvious reasons, right? And when I say there were hobos, I mean between an estimated 2 million to 4 million adults who left their homes in search of food and lodging.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of the population at the time. And most of these people, but not all of them, were men. So you mentioned they were transient workers. They crisscross country. As we discussed, they hop on a freight train, jumping into the boxcars as the trains pulled away from their stops or slowed down at bends in the track. And that was, of course, and still today remains very, very dangerous. You know, one false move and you're under the train, losing a leg or even worse, you know, some injuries or death. Some hobos had a special skill or a special trade. Others would just take any job. But they weren't bums. You know, they wanted to work. They just didn't want to be tied down into one place. So they really resented people who saw them as beggars, right? They were not beggars. They wanted to work. But as a result of being lumped in with other groups of undesirables in many towns, as you can imagine, they were often unwelcome. Farmers during the Great Depression and afterwards, they were preoccupied with their own survival in these small towns. They had their own stuff they had going on and they needed to worry about. They didn't have patience for a guy wandering in from the outskirts of town who said he was going to, you know, work in exchange for food because he was hungry. He could be legit, right? But he could also be a thief. He could be crazy. Yeah. He could be a criminal who's on the run. Like, you just never knew. So a lot of people really weren't willing to take their chances.
I've seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Exactly. So you know the tale. Yeah. And hobo numbers began dropping in the 50s. So some are still around today, albeit the numbers are far, far smaller, as you can imagine. But there's still an annual festival each summer in Britt, Iowa. So look up Britt, Iowa on the map. We'll actually post some links to this on our episode page, and folks can do a little bit of homework and maybe attend the next Hobo Festival in Britt, Iowa.
We should go. We should definitely go.
Yeah.
Or would we be allowed? Would we be welcome there? Or do we have to kind of get there by the rails?
Yeah. So some people do still, there are still hobos today who still do hop the rails and travel around. Now, the hobos today tend to have GoPro cameras and things like that, and they'll go into a library or, you know, someplace with Wi-Fi and upload their videos. But yes.
And show up at Coachella.
Yeah. No,
that's
a hippie, not a hobo.
Oh, okay. Got
it. Slight difference there. Yeah. But speaking of hobos, we made the joke earlier about the typeface. And, if you go back and listen to that episode, that was sort of this Russian name that got ascribed or sort of twisted or retranslated or repurposed for this typeface. But that's not, in this case, where the name hobo comes from. So, in fact, it's actually debated. Some people think it's Latin for homo bonus, which is good man. So you take the HO from homo and BO from bonus and hobo, right? Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Could have been coined by a group of soldiers returning home from the Civil War, which we talked about earlier, who were, quote, homeward bound, unquote. So HOBO, homeward bound.
Yeah.
But then also, migratory workers during the late 1800s were often referred to as hoboys. So these workers, according to the council that rules over the convention, the Britt, Iowa Convention, these were the original hobos since they worked as they traveled. So, maybe that's the, if we go to Britt, Iowa, we can suss out the actual truth.
Yeah, and we would get to say, oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah, it's a hard day's work.
Boy.
And we'd have to, take our kerchiefs out of our overalls and wipe the sweat off our brows.
I know, yeah. I love wiping the sweat with my kerchief.
Okay, I think suddenly we have future plans revolving around a hobo festival. Okay.
But tell me more.
Yeah. So now that we know about the people, so we know about this lifestyle, let's talk about the symbols themselves, because this is really when it starts to get interesting. So, as we've talked about, the symbols were a way for hobos to stay connected. They're keeping one another safe. So this was really a tribe. This was a lifestyle. And while they may have been searching for employment individually, they still were a community. And so as a result of that, they wanted to aid each other in their travels. There was sort of this like mutual appreciation society or welfare that wanted to take care of one another. As a result, the symbols provided guidance for things like which direction to go or where would be a good spot to catch a train. Details about the town, like the police don't like hobos here, or the homeowners. Hey, these folks are an easy mark, right? You can get some food or clothes from these people. And finding food was really a constant problem. And so often hobos were begging at farmhouses and, like we talked about, rural areas generally. You know, there are train tracks and things crisscrossing these. This is rural America.
Right.
And so if a farmer were generous, the hobo would mark that spot so that others following would know it was a good place to try their luck. Like, hey, I got grub here, I got some clothes here, give it a shot, right? So what do these symbols actually look like? How would people know what these different things meant? All right, so let's go through a few of these really quickly. So a cross, if you just saw a cross, you know, that is referred to colloquially as angel food, quote unquote. And what that meant was if you go to a church sermon, this church is willing to feed the down and out after that.
Okay.
So stick it out and there'll be some food for you here. Right? So a triangle with hands is the homeowner has a gun. So generally not good. You know, if you figure that out, that's
caution,
probably,
right?
Hightail it out of there. And then a horizontal zigzag, that means a barking dog. So, in other words, the dog not only means you can't get close to the house, but it could tip off the homeowner to the fact that you're lurking around. So that's a bad thing.
Right.
So a square missing its top line, so essentially sort of like a U shape without, means it's safe to camp in that spot. So like a little sort of cubby, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a top hat and a triangle, that equals wealth. So like a rich person's here, right?
Yeah, that's like where the guy from Monopoly would live,
yes,
right?
exactly. Or Mr. Peanut.
Mr. Moneybag. Yeah, or Thirster Howell the Third.
Yeah, Lovey.
Lover. All of them.
Yeah, maybe they're all living on the same plantation, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So a spearhead is a warning to defend yourself, so you know, a sharp triangle shape.
Okay.
Circle with two parallel arrows. Get out fast. Hobos aren't welcome. Make a break for it. And related to that, two interlocking circles, handcuffs. Like hobos are jailed. Like you're gonna, you might get 3 hots on a cot, but not that way.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Yes,
that one is.
Definitely. So a caduceus symbol, which is of course the staff with the 2 snakes and the wings at the top. There's a doctor.
You would get medical attention.
Yes, doctor living in the house. Look at you.
I could be a hobo.
You could be. You're an honorary hobo in my book.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Cross with a smiley face in one of the corners. Doctor is going to treat hobos free of charge. So that's pretty good.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This one's my favorite. So a picture of a cat means a kind lady lives here.
Oh.
Yeah, I like that one. Or I guess a cat lives there. But I'm thinking it's a kind lady.
Cat lives
a
there.
kind cat will share his fish with you. A wavy line signifying water above an X means there's fresh water at this campsite. So you can stay here and you're going to have a place to bathe, get a drink, that sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
3 diagonal lines, not a safe place. Again, kind of like our slashes like in Ghostbusters, like right?
Yeah, don't go there.
Yeah, get lost. A square with a slanted roof signifying a house, but it has an X through it. So the house has already been burned or tricked, right, by another hobo. So kind of scorched earth, like somebody blew it for us, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the last one, 2 shovels crossed over, means work is available. As we said earlier, these guys wanted to work. They wanted to earn an honest dollar. And shovels, because most hobos at the time, they performed manual labor. They weren't building websites.
Right. They were digging.
Yeah, they were digging ditches. Hey, speaking of digging, I'm digging on some of the things that you talked about that might be made up with this dollar bill symbolism.
Yes.
And so
Alternate theories.
Think, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. Let's take a break. You buy me a drink. And then when we get back, I'll let you tell me and the listeners all about your dollar bill symbolism.
That sounds like a wonderful deal. We'll have some dollars out so we can actually look at them at the same time.
Oh,
So
that's even better.
I'll fall for that again, as long as you can tell me what the symbol is for a free drink moocher that I need to draw on your back.
Well, I was going to say, as luck would have it, that picture is right on my driver's license.
Oh, okay. We'll be back. Elliot, secret codes, hidden symbols. If I didn't know better, I'd swear people are listening in on our conversation. Am I nuts?
No, Todd. I'm sure this whole conversation is going to stay right here between just the two of us.
While we adjust our tinfoil hats and ask the bartender about some secret drink recipes, freshen your beverage as well. We'll be right back. Hi, while we have your attention, if you want to learn more about us and the podcast, there are a few ways to do it.
Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com. All of that is spelled out. No numbers.
Kind of a long URL, so do yourself a favor and bookmark it. Once you're there, you can find links to more information about the subjects in this episode, our episode archive, and information about both of us.
Wait, we do want people to visit, right?
Well, and look for us on social media. You can find those links on our website as well.
And while we're at it, if you have a friend who you feel will dig on our rambling,
tell him or her what we're up to.
While we can't guarantee that they will remain your friend, we can guarantee that they will listen to at least 30 seconds of whatever episode you send them the link to.
That's being a little shameless.
And speaking of being shameless, it wouldn't be a proper ask if we didn't mention that if you like what you hear, you can also make a donation via our website. We have a Nigerian prince handling all transactions for us.
In fact, he told us to mention that we have stickers to mail to anyone who donates $10 or more. Are we done?
We're done.
We're done. All right, Elliot, if you've got a $1 bill handy, I'm going to blow your mind with some theories of our money. These things you carry around all day. I personally don't carry any of these around. I don't think I want money around me anymore, so I've given up on
It's voodoo.
It's voodoo. All right. First one, which is pretty common, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the bill where the number 1 is, there appears to be a tiny creature peeking out from there. And it looks like an owl, and you might even have to have a magnifying glass to see it. It's super tiny.
I remember learning about the little owl. A friend of mine pointed that out. I think I might have been in middle school.
Well, it's considered a symbol of the Freemasons.
Ooh, okay.
So that's going to be a common theme through this. All right. Remember the Great Seal that we talked about that has the exploding stars above the eagle's head?
Yeah.
If you connect all of the stars together, you get a giant Star of David, which leads to the founding fathers' Judeo-Christian beliefs. It's thought. Now, this you got to squint for. If you look very closely at the 4th row on the pyramid, it's on the back of the dollar, you'll see what appears to be a smiling face, or some people say it's a ghost face.
Oh, yeah.
So, question is, did that mean anything? Yeah, so does the ghost face mean anything?
Well, it means have a nice day.
Well, on the pyramid, yeah.
Well, I mean,
maybe
like, here's your dollar, have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day, hobo.
Yeah, that's how it works, yeah. All right, on the back, up in the corners, where the number 1s are, it said that in that intricate design that actually is a Maltese cross. And you kind of have to look at it and you can see Maltese cross is kind of like the Iron Cross, but it has points on it.
Yeah.
It's like a giant plus sign. And the Maltese cross was commonly known symbol of a group of knights, commonly known as Knights Hospitaller, which is they were an order of knights from Jerusalem. So again, little bit of a Masonic connection there. All right, this one Even conspiracy theorists are like, don't know. On the back of the dollar, down at the bottom where some of the intricate stuff is, like if you look on the left-hand side, there is an outline of the Hindu god Shiva, known as the Destroyer. It's on both sides of the one. It's encased in webbing. The hair is tied up in a bun. But, again, what is Shiva doing on the dollar? And why would they hide that?
So, yeah, I see it now.
Who knows? Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about the appearance of Masonic symbols, and it goes a little deeper. Like some people are believing there happen to be 9 feathers beneath the eagle, and that is thought to represent the 9 spheres rising through the return to heaven. I don't know what that means, but there is a Freemason site that we will post, and you can check it out and see what that means. And there also happens to be 32 feathers on the eagle's dexter wing, which is, commonly known as the number of ordinary degrees in the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. So, coincidence? I don't know. All right. So you talked about the Eye of Providence being a Masonic symbol. It is widely used as a Masonic symbol, but it wasn't used until the late 18th century. So our money was actually created before then. So was it used as a symbol for the Masons? Yeah, but it was used for a lot of other things too. And it was really just kind of part of the aesthetic of the late 18th century. That was more than anything.
So they just loved eyeballs.
Everybody just loves the one eye, in the triangle.
Okay.
So now this will make you go, here. There's a recent example of a British 50-pound note that also displays a pyramid that's lacking the capstone, similar to the U.S. $1 bill. So many people think that's evidence that the Masons / Illuminati are starting the New World Order, right? That now we're tying Britain and the U.S. together for global control and domination. It could happen. That's all I'm going to say. It could happen.
So wait. So the British saw the unfinished pyramid on our money and said,
right,
we want a piece of that action.
Yeah.
And so they added
we're going
to
wait
theirs.
like a couple hundred years and do it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense.
Perfect sense. Some people think the scrolls, that have the Latin words, that they appear to be serpents' tongues. Again, people are trying to pin some negativity on the Masons. A little bit of maybe there's some magic hocus pocus going on here.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at, they just used a variety of different illustration styles, I think, for the different ribbons. Because in the Great Seal, the ribbons are different.
Well, clip art choices were pretty slim back then.
That's true.
They did what they did. All right, you remember we talked about the Roman numerals on the bottom of the pyramid?
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember what year that told us?
Of course.
As the foundation?
1776.
Anything important happened that year? Yeah. That was the year the Illuminati were founded, Elliot. There
Todd.
you go. Boom.
Todd.
Mind blown.
Todd.
Yeah.
Since we're both in the Illuminati, we weren't supposed to share that information.
Oh, that is the first rule of the Illuminati, isn't it?
You don't talk about the Illuminati. Yes.
Okay. All right. I thought that was an interesting coincidence, but all right. Now, here's one last thing on conspiracy theories. And this one, is a little mind-boggling. So if you look at the reverse side of the seal, the one with the pyramid, and you see the Latin stuff, right?
Yep.
If you connect the first and last letters of the phrase "annuit coeptus" to the first, the last, and the middle letters to the bottom Latin phrase "novus ordo seclorum," because there's no middle to the top one, you know what you get? You get an upside down pentagram, Elliot.
Oh, I was trying to spell something. I was going to say the only thing I got was confused.
Well, so you get an upside down pentagram, but those letters that it's pointing to, Spells Mason. Yeah. I'm telling you. It's a little too coincidental. And if we overlaid the Masonic logo, the compass and the ruler, it fits perfectly over the pyramid. So the ruler touches the very bottom of the ground, and the eye is cradled in the compass. So, I'm just saying, it's just food for thought, Elliot. Food for thought.
Man.
But let me leave you with a couple other things that are purely factual here, and just in the spirit of blowing your mind. So, first of all, there's a farm in Delaware that mulches our old money to the tune of 4 tons of it every single day. I mean, what is that about, right?
Yeah.
People know that money is kind of gross, and there was a 2002 study done by the U.S. Air Force. Heard of them? They found that 94% of $1 bills tested for bacteria.
Only 94%?
Only 94%. But that's not all. 80% of dollar bills hold traces of cocaine.
Only 80%?
80% of all dollar bills tested have traces of cocaine. I thought that was quite of a bit.
I've actually heard that number is being higher.
Oh, okay. So that was in a CNN survey in 2017. So I thought that was a little mind-boggling. And interesting enough, the dollar bill is the stepchild of our currency. All other bills have been redesigned, but It's really not worth it to redesign the dollar bill. It's not counterfeited that much, and it would cost too much money. So there's even an act that says we're not gonna do that.
Well, I know there's been a lot of talk since there's also a dollar coin. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was Susan B. Anthony. Then more recently, the Sacagawea dollar coin. And so, if I remember correctly, to your point earlier about the dollar bill having such a short lifespan, it actually loses money for the mint versus coins that are far, far more durable.
Right, yeah.
But
because I think there's the dollar has one of the shorter lifespans. It's like 4 years or something.
No,
like that.
it's months. It's like 3.5 months or something.
Oh,
they just
yeah,
get
really?
I think so. Yeah, we'll look this up. We'll post the stat, but. Yeah, so it's getting, that farm in Delaware you mentioned, they're really busy.
Yeah,
and,
4 tons, man.
Yeah, so as a result of that was the push for the coins, because people were like, well, coins last a long time. But the dollar bill, as we've already talked about, is so iconic that people don't want to get rid of it. And the other reality is, aside from the handful of coin collectors there are in this country, what is it? Numismatist? Isn't that a coin collector? That's my SAT word of the day. Aside from those guys and gals, most people devalue coins, right? Something paper is always worth more than something, the irony, right? You talked about the greenbacks, and people actually wanted hard currency. They wanted the metal. Yeah. That now it's the opposite. It's like, whatever, a quarter, And so a lot of people will look at a Sacagawea dollar, even though it's exactly the same value as a dollar bill, and they just kind of look at it and they're like, it's a coin. It can't, I can't fold this. It's not, what could it possibly be worth? Yeah, like whatever, and it's one of these things that I think strike foreigners very often as being sort of quirky about the U.S. because, of course, other countries have coins that are worth far more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, enough about facts. Let's jump back into a little bit of fiction here, okay?
Okay, good deal.
All right. So going back to our friends, the hobos. So we talked about these hobo symbols, and we talked about this alphabet. It sounds very purposeful. There's real reasons why we had it. We also have a use case scenario, like why it would be used, where it would be used, the people using it, all this sort of thing. There's just one problem, Todd.
What's that?
Is it all bullshit? Was it all made up? So
it can't be.
Yeah, I know this. It breaks my heart too to even have to ask this question. Okay, so let's start to unpack this. Okay.
All right.
So as early as the 1870s, if you recall, we talked about hobos kind of emerging on the scene right after the Civil War. So in the 1870s, it was reported that hobos communicated with each other by a way of a system of cryptic hobo signs, as we started to talk about. And then these reports started to appear in newspapers and popular books. And this lasted straight through the late 20s and into the 30s, into the Depression. And so this continues to turn up in popular culture even today, right? So a couple of these books. So Henry Dreyfuss, who was a very famous, well-known graphic designer, has a big book on symbols that he came out with in the late 60s, early 70s time period. And he put the Hobo Alphabet in that book. So there's actually a design book. Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful book. And then John Hodgman, who we know for no other reason than the PC and the Mac and PC ads. He's also, of course, a fixture on NPR, among other places. So he wrote a book a few years ago called The Areas of My Expertise, and it features a section on hobo signs listing signs found in newspapers of the day, of the era. And then he also decided that he would make up some of his own hobo symbols as well and put those in the book too. Hey, why not, right?
I guess you could. Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. And then there are also displays. So Steamtown National Historic Site in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the National Cryptologic Museum in Annapolis Junction, Maryland. So they talk about this alphabet. So far, this is sounding pretty good. In fact, I'll go one step further. So the Webster's Third New International Dictionary also supplies a listing of hobo signs under the entry for hobo. So, things are great, right? Think about, we have ample paper trail. We have 150 years of documentation. So, apparently, in spite of all this, we don't know if any of these symbols were actually used by real hobos.
So it's a documented history of just documented history.
Right.
It may not have existed, and that's fine.
Yeah, people just sort of fell in love with the notion, and kind of like our friend Bigfoot, it just kind of took on a life of its own and perpetuated itself.
I think we should start it back.
I think we should start a Bigfoot alphabet.
Oh, that's even better. Great idea.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna read a few things, and then we can get hard to work on the back of our beer coasters on our Bigfoot alphabet, okay? Okay. Some people think that the signs were invented early on by a writer or some handful of writers seeking to add to the hobo mythology, right? So, we talked earlier about this lifestyle being romanticized. It was in pop culture. And then it was perpetuated and embellished by other writers over the years. They were adding color to their own stories, right? So several hobos during the days that these signs were reportedly most in use asserted that they were, in fact, direct quotes here, a popular fancy or, quote, a fabrication. And so the newspapers in the early and peak days of hoboing, so again, late 19th century, early, mid 20th century, they printed photos of hobos drawing and leaving these signs, right? So they have photo documentation of this. But the problem here is that there were known photos of the signs just by themselves that were found later by property owners or cities that were painting things over, wondering about vandalism, where they would have served certainly a practical purpose. These bridge abutments, these fence posts, all of these places we mentioned earlier, rail yards, right? So this leaves open the possibility that all of these photos were staged simply to add color to the story, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, hey, I'm writing this thing, hobo, you want to help me out, right? We'll both win here.
Right.
And then, nonetheless, it's believed that hobos did use and do use some graffiti, even today, to communicate in the form of monikers, or as they refer to them, monicas, kind of like the name of your former girlfriend, or the musical instrument shortened, like harmonica, monica, right?
Harmonica.
Harmonica.
Yeah. Harmonica.
You know, whenever I would sneak out to take a bathroom break, I was always busted by the harmonica. Back in grade school. Anyway, but that's an aside.
Yeah.
So these monikers were generally considered simply, it's like a road name or a date and the direction that the hobo was heading in, right? Like Todd was here, Elliot was here, and then an arrow saying, headed due west. And that was so kind of like graffiti where other people would see it. And so this persists even to this day. So you got your cell phones now, and a moniker is as a result of that simply used as a tag. Like if you go to a rail yard even now, or if you're ever sitting at a train crossing, you see a freight train whipping by, a lot of times you see these graffiti tags on the trains. And that's kind of our contemporary or modern day hobo kind of saying Elliot was here, right? And so when someone goes into a rail yard, they'll be like, oh yeah, cool, Elliot was here, Todd was here, when they rode in this train car or whatever. So just kind of a little bit of a carryover into present day from this lifestyle that we know the lifestyle existed, but what we don't know is to what degree the alphabet associated with it or the symbols associated with it actually existed in tandem with the people. So I will again leave it up to the listeners to decide. It's up to us to simply present information, and then
that's right.
People can do with it as they may.
It's fair and balanced, Elliot. And speaking of symbols, what's the symbol to get the bartender's attention? Because we need some more drinks here.
I think if you get out all those dollar bills you've been looking at, we will get new drinks. Toot sweet.
All right.
Yes.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, folks, this is ending our second season, and we have enjoyed spending so much time with you, so much fun with you. We are excited to be back for season 3 very, very soon. We'll have some between season goodies. So please, please, please stay tuned. And we really appreciate the reviews, the subscriptions, and we are not above speaking gigs, and we're also not above donations. So
that's true. Yeah. So definitely not.
Whether it be dollar bills, free drinks, or a combination of both of those things.
We'll leave a good review on your mailbox post.
Exactly. We will scroll a thumbs up in the conspicuous spot of your choice.
Absolutely.